A young black girl stands trembling in the middle of a busy mall, her voice breaking as she tries to explain who her mother is. Instead of listening, the officer laughs, a sharp, humiliating laugh that cuts through the crowd. People stare, some in disbelief, others silently judging. To him, her words are nothing more than a joke. But the truth, waiting just steps away, will change everything. What happens when the person he least expects walks in and turns his laughter into silence?
Her name was Maya, a bright 16-year-old who carried herself with the quiet determination of someone raised to believe in dignity and respect. At school, she excelled in debate and dreamed of one day studying law, just like her mother. Friends knew her as kind and resilient, the one who always spoke up when others stayed silent. On weekends, Maya loved simple things, strolling through the mall, flipping through books at the store, or sharing ice cream with her younger cousins. To anyone passing by, she was just a regular teenager living out moments of carefree youth. But behind that gentle smile was a girl taught by her family to stand tall in a world that often judged her before she spoke. Her mother, a respected federal judge, instilled in her the importance of fairness and the courage to face injustice without fear. Maya admired her deeply, but she never imagined that one day those lessons would be tested in the most public and humiliating way. That day began like any other. The sun shone brightly. Crowds filled the mall with chatter and laughter, and Maya wandered through stores carrying a small shopping bag. Nothing seemed unusual until a sudden misunderstanding turned ordinary moments into something darker. A uniformed officer's eyes lingered too long, suspicion flashing where it never belonged. Maya's heart pounded, confusion rising as she realized the attention wasn't harmless. Something was about to happen that would strip away the comfort of her ordinary afternoon and force her into a spotlight she never asked for. What started as a routine trip to the mall was about to unravel into a confrontation that would reveal the harsh reality of prejudice and leave everyone watching breathless.
Maya barely noticed the officer at first. She was browsing a display when his shadow fell across her. At first, she assumed he was just passing by. But the longer he stood, the sharper the air felt around her. His gaze wasn't casual, it was piercing, suspicious, searching for guilt where there was none. Without warning, he stepped forward and demanded to see her bag. Startled, Maya clutched it tighter, explaining calmly that it was just a small purchase. But his tone grew harsher, echoing louder than the chatter around them. People began to slow their steps, curious eyes gathering as if a spectacle was unfolding. Maya's cheeks burned as he questioned her, his words laced with mockery. He didn't ask, he accused. Every sentence implied that she didn't belong, that her very presence was reason enough for suspicion. When Maya tried to explain, her voice trembled, but she stood firm. She told him who her mother was, believing, hoping that those words would be enough to make him pause, to realize this wasn't what he thought. Instead, the officer laughed. Not just a small chuckle, but a loud, careless laugh that drew even more attention. To him, the idea of a young black girl claiming her mother was a federal judge was nothing more than comedy. Shoppers exchanged glances, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some pulled out their phones, recording. Others shook their heads, but no one stepped forward. Humiliation swept over Maya like a wave. Her tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. She remembered her mother's words, "Your voice matters. Never let anyone strip it away." So, with shaking hands, she repeated herself, louder this time, But the officer only leaned in closer, smirking as if daring her to keep going. The tension thickened. Each second dragged, every laugh he let out stabbing deeper. Maya felt trapped, not surrounded by walls, but by the silence of those who watched and did nothing. Her heart raced, not just with fear, but with anger. Why was it always her skin that spoke louder than her words? As the officer's voice boomed across the mall, his authority unchecked, Maya felt the ground beneath her shift. The situation was no longer just about her bag. It was about her dignity, her worth, her very existence being reduced to a punchline. And then, just as the laughter echoed once more, the atmosphere changed. A hush fell over the crowd. People's eyes widened, whispers turned sharp. Maya felt it before she saw it. A familiar presence entered the space, steady, commanding, impossible to ignore. The officer's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He straightened his posture, still unaware of the storm that had just walked in. Maya's breath caught in her chest, her tears forgotten, because the moment she had prayed for, the one she never thought would arrive, was finally here. Someone was about to turn his laughter into silence.
The crowd parted slowly, like water giving way to a force too powerful to resist. Every head turned toward the woman striding into the scene, confident, poised, her presence commanding silence with each step. It was Maya's mother. In her hand, a shopping bag swung lightly, but her eyes carried a weight that froze the room. The officer's laughter stumbled into awkward silence. For a moment, he tried to maintain his authority, clearing his throat and shifting his stance, but the shift in the air was undeniable. This was no ordinary parent. This was a federal judge, a woman who had spent her life demanding justice in rooms where truth mattered more than prejudice. And now, justice had walked into the mall. Maya's trembling form seemed to steady instantly as her mother's gaze locked on the officer. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The sheer presence of her authority was louder than his mocking laugh had ever been. The shoppers who had once stood frozen in passive curiosity now leaned closer, their silence heavy with expectation. The officer stammered, his words losing confidence, but it was too late. His arrogance had already been laid bare before the crowd. Every smirk, every dismissive chuckle now replayed in the minds of those watching, and no amount of backtracking could erase the memory. Maya's mother stepped closer, her eyes unwavering, her expression cutting through the facade of authority he had wielded moments earlier. The officer, once towering in mockery, now seemed small, stripped of control, exposed before the very people he thought would support him. Maya exhaled deeply, the humiliation and fear beginning to loosen their grip, replaced by something stronger, vindication. And in that charged silence, just as the officer prepared to speak again, her mother's presence crushed every ounce of false power he clung to. The crowd waited, breathless, for what would happen next.
The officer's smirk had vanished, replaced by a silence he could not control. Maya's mother stood firmly, her presence commanding not just the room, but the truth that had been buried under laughter and arrogance moments before. She did not need to raise her voice. Her very existence, her role, and her authority were louder than anything he had said. And in that moment, the officer finally realized the weight of the mistake he had made. Maya stood taller, her tears drying, her heart steadying. She was no longer just the girl mocked in front of strangers. She was the daughter of a woman who had fought battles far greater than this, and she had witnessed firsthand how power shifts when dignity is reclaimed. For the first time in that painful encounter, Maya felt something she thought had been lost: strength.
But the impact of this moment was far greater than what happened in that mall. Because for every Maya whose mother arrives in time to defend her, there are countless others who face that humiliation alone. The laughter, the suspicion, the dismissal of worth. These are not isolated mistakes. They are symptoms of something much deeper, something far more dangerous, a system where prejudice too often hides behind a badge or a uniform. This was not just a story about one officer and one girl. It was about all the moments where silence allows injustice to thrive and all the voices that must rise to break it. So the question remains, how many more Mayas will be forced to prove their worth before the world begins to see their humanity first? The time to reflect is now. The time to speak is now. And the time to act together is long overdue.